He was just a street kid to them, but one day they'd all know his name. Amir didn't beg because he wanted to. He begged because survival didn't give him a choice. Every rejection was a slap, every cold stare a reminder that the world didn't care. But beneath the dirt on his face and the hunger in his eyes, there was something no one could see. Fire. Not the kind that burns down cities, the kind that builds empires. While people tossed coins without looking, Amir wasn't just collecting money, he was collecting reasons. Reasons to rise, reasons to fight, reasons to prove that even a street kid could rewrite his story. And one day, he would. One day, they'd all regret not seeing who he really was. Sometimes, one moment of humiliation plants the seed of a future no one can control. Amir's stomach growled with hunger as he wandered through the bustling market. The air was thick with the smell of spices and freshly baked bread, a cruel reminder of everything he couldn't have. His clothes hung off his thin frame, torn and stained, but his pride was still intact. For now. Then he saw him, Rafiq. A man who walked like the ground itself owed him something. His suit was sharp, his watch gleaming in the sun, and his eyes cold enough to freeze water. The type of man who thought success was measured by the number of people beneath him. Amir hesitated, his heart pounding. He hated begging, but hunger doesn't care about pride. He approached slowly, his voice soft but steady. "Sir, just a little help, please." Rafiq stopped, turned, and laughed, not just a chuckle, a cruel, piercing laugh that caught the attention of the crowd. "Look at this filthy street rat, begging for scraps," he sneered, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. The people around them smiled, whispered, even chuckled, but Amir didn't. His cheeks burned with shame, his fists clenched at his sides. He wanted to disappear. But instead, something else happened. Something snapped. Amir didn't run. He didn't cry. He stared straight into Rafiq's arrogant eyes, the humiliation burning into his memory like a scar. "One day," Amir thought, "you'll remember me, and you won't be laughing." It wasn't just hunger that filled Amir's belly that day. It was fire, the kind that doesn't fade, the kind that grows, the kind that waits. And deep inside, Amir knew. This wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning. Humiliation can break a man, or build him into something unbreakable. Amir walked away from the crowd, his head low, but not in defeat. The sting of Rafiq's words echoed in his mind, louder than the city's chaos. "Filthy street rat." The words weren't just an insult. They were a brand, seared into his pride. But beneath the shame, something was rising, a defiance stronger than any hunger. He found an empty alley, leaned against a crumbling wall, and let the weight of the day crush him, for a moment. Just a moment, because Amir wasn't built to stay down. "Is this who I am?" he thought, staring at his dirt-streaked hands. "Or is this just where I am?" His reflection wasn't filled with self-pity. It was filled with questions, and one answer. "I'll prove my worth someday." No audience, no applause. Just a silent vow whispered to himself, carved deeper than Rafiq's mockery ever could. The next morning, Amir didn't beg. Not because he wasn't hungry, but because he was starving for something bigger. Respect. He knocked on doors, offered to carry heavy bags, clean dusty floors, run errands. Most slammed the door in his face. Some didn't even bother to look at him. But he kept going, because every rejection was a reminder. "I'm not done yet." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Amir wasn't richer in coins, but he was richer in something more valuable: determination. Rafiq had tried to break him. Instead, he built him. And Amir's story was just getting started. Greatness doesn't start with success. It starts with struggle. Amir's mornings began before the sun touched the city's rooftops. No alarms, just hunger, both in his stomach and in his heart. He didn't beg anymore. Not because life had gotten easier, but because he'd made a choice. "I'd rather break my back than break my pride." He found work wherever he could, washing cars under the scorching sun, scrubbing the grime off tires until his hands bled. He carried heavy sacks at the local market, his skinny frame buckling under the weight, but his spirit? Unshaken. People still looked at him the same, like he was invisible. But Amir had stopped caring, because he wasn't doing it for their approval. He was doing it for himself. The world wasn't kind. Bosses exploited him, paying less than promised. Some days he was scammed, working for hours without a coin in return. Others mocked him, whispering, "He'll never be more than a street rat." But what they didn't know was this: every insult was fuel, every setback was a lesson, and every failure was a step forward. When his body ached, Amir reminded himself, pain means I'm trying. And as long as I'm trying, I'm not failing. Even on the hardest days, when his pockets were empty and his hopes thin, he refused to give up. Because quitting wasn't an option. He wasn't just working for food, he was working for a future. One small step at a time, one big dream in his heart. And no one, not even Rafiq, could take that away from him. Sometimes the right person doesn't save you. They show you how to save yourself. Amir was hauling crates at the crowded market, sweat dripping into his tired eyes, when he met Rehan, an old vendor with a weathered face, sharp eyes, and a voice rough from years of shouting over noisy crowds. Rehan had seen thousands of faces pass by, but Amir was different. Why? Because Amir didn't just carry weight on his shoulders, he carried purpose. One day, after watching Amir struggle with a load twice his size, Rehan called out, "Boy, why do you work so hard for so little?" Amir wiped the sweat from his brow, breathing heavily, "Because one day I won't have to." That answer, it wasn't just words, it was ambition, and Rehan recognized it because he'd once had it too. Intrigued, Rehan offered Amir small tasks, stacking boxes, organizing goods. But more than work, he offered something Amir had never been given before: guidance. Over cups of cheap tea, Rehan taught Amir lessons beyond the market. Money isn't made by working harder, it's made by working smarter. Don't just sell things, solve problems. People pay more for solutions. Knowledge is like a ladder. The more you climb, the more you see. Rehan showed Amir how to count profits, manage expenses, and, most importantly, think like a businessman, not a laborer. For the first time, Amir saw the world differently, not as a place where he was trapped, but as a place filled with opportunities hidden in plain sight. Not just a market, a classroom, not just work, a strategy. "I don't want to carry crates forever," Amir confessed one evening. Rehan smiled. "Then stop thinking like someone who will." That was the day Amir's dreams grew bigger than survival. He didn't just want to live, he wanted to succeed. And now, for the first time, he knew how. Success doesn't come with a loud bang. It starts with a small spark. With Rehan's guidance, Amir took his first real step into business, not as a laborer, but as an entrepreneur. No grand store, no fancy shelves, just a small wooden cart, a few second-hand items, and a dream bigger than the city itself. Amir's business was simple: buy low, sell high. Old books, used clothes, broken gadgets he'd fix with makeshift tools, things people discarded, he turned into opportunities. But it wasn't just about selling. Rehan's lessons echoed in his mind. Don't sell a product, sell a story. People don't buy from carts, they buy from confidence. Know when to speak, but know when to listen. Amir learned quickly. He observed the market, watching what people needed, what they ignored, and how prices shifted with the seasons. He mastered the art of negotiation, knowing when to smile, when to stay silent, and when to walk away. Days turned into weeks. At first, sales were slow, but Amir's determination didn't waver, because every no brought him closer to a yes. Then it happened. A customer approached, a man looking for a used radio. Amir showcased one he'd fixed himself, speaking with confidence that hid the fear bubbling beneath. "I'll take it," the man said, handing over a crumpled bill. Amir's first honest profit. It wasn't much, a small amount, barely enough for a full meal. But to Amir, it felt like a fortune, not because of the money, but because it was his, earned through sweat, strategy, and stubborn refusal to give up. As he held that money, Amir didn't see currency. He saw proof. Proof that he wasn't just a street kid. He was a businessman in the making, and that small victory? It wasn't the peak. It was the spark. The spark that would ignite an empire. The hardest part isn't starting. It's refusing to stop. After Amir's first taste of success, there was no looking back. That crumpled bill wasn't just money. It was momentum. He didn't waste a single coin. Instead of celebrating, he reinvested, buying more goods, fixing what was broken, and learning what people wanted before they even asked. His small cart grew, not in size, but in reputation. They'd whisper in the market, "The boy with the sharp mind." Day by day, his stall attracted more customers, not because of flashy signs or cheap deals, but because of Amir's dedication. He knew every product's story. He remembered every regular customer's name. He worked when others rested. Respect followed. Local merchants who once ignored him now nodded in approval. Some even sought advice, curious about how a former street kid was making waves in their world. But success has its price. Competition grew fierce. Rivals tried to undercut his prices. Some spread rumors to ruin his reputation. And one day, his entire stall was robbed. Everything gone in the blink of an eye. Standing in front of his empty spot, Amir felt the sting of betrayal, but not defeat. He clenched his fists, his jaw tight. "You can steal my goods," he thought, "but you can't steal my grit." Instead of drowning in anger, he started over. Borrowed a small loan from Rehan, worked double shifts, rebuilt his stock piece by piece. Because Amir knew one thing: failure isn't falling down, it's refusing to get back up. And Amir, he wasn't done climbing. Success doesn't wait for the perfect moment. It comes when you dare to take the risk. Amir stood at a crossroads, not on the street but in his mind. His small stall had recovered from the robbery, and business was steady. But steady wasn't enough. Not for Amir. Not for the boy who once promised himself, "I'll prove my worth someday." That's when he heard about an opportunity, a struggling supplier with a warehouse full of unsold goods, willing to sell everything for cheap. But there was a catch. It required every last coin Amir had saved. If it failed, he'd lose everything. But if it worked, it could change his life. Rehan warned him, "Think carefully, Amir. One wrong move." Amir smiled, his eyes sharp with determination. "I'd rather fail trying than regret not trying at all." With trembling hands and a fearless heart, Amir made the deal. Days turned into weeks. The market was slow at first, and doubt crept in like shadows. But Amir didn't flinch. He marketed differently, bundling products, offering deals, and learning customer behavior. Slowly, things shifted. Sales skyrocketed. His gamble paid off. With the profits, he didn't just upgrade his stall. He opened his first small shop. A modest space, but with shelves, a sign with his name, and a door he never thought he'd own. One evening, after closing, Amir sat alone in his shop. The dusty floors, chipped walls, they didn't matter, because this space was his. He looked around, remembering the boy who once begged on the same streets. The boy who was humiliated, broken, invisible. "Look how far you've come," he thought. But even in that moment of reflection, there was no satisfaction. Not because he wasn't proud, but because he was still hungry. Hungry for more, for growth, for the next bold move. Because Amir didn't climb this far to stop. He was just getting started. Success isn't just about what you gain, it's about who notices. Amir's small shop became more than just a business. It became a symbol, a place where people didn't just buy products, they witnessed a story. The story of a boy who refused to be defined by the streets. As his profits grew, so did his ambition. But Amir knew success couldn't survive in isolation. So he did something bold. He started networking. He attended local business gatherings, dressed modestly, but with a confidence that couldn't be ignored. While others boasted about their wealth, Amir spoke about persistence, lessons from failure, and the power of resilience. People listened. His sharp mind and genuine honesty attracted influential business people. They admired his hustle, they respected his integrity, and they wanted to work with him. Amir formed partnerships, expanded his supply chains, and soon his name echoed beyond the market. Not as a street kid, but as a respected businessman. But behind the success, behind the handshakes and deals, there was a silent shadow. Rafiq. Amir never spoke his name, never mentioned that moment of humiliation, but he never forgot, not out of bitterness, but because that moment was the fuel behind every late night, every early morning, every risk he took. Rafiq's laugh wasn't a scar, it was a spark. And as Amir stood in his growing empire, surrounded by respect he earned, not inherited, he realized something. I don't need revenge to win. My success is loud enough. The higher you build without humility, the harder the fall. While Amir's empire quietly rose, Rafiq's began to crack, not with a sudden crash, but with the slow, unnoticed erosion caused by one fatal flaw: arrogance. Rafiq had always believed he was untouchable. Success had made him reckless. He made deals fueled by ego, not strategy. Investments in ventures he didn't understand, partnerships with people who only cared about his money, not his vision. His advisors warned him. "This deal is risky, sir. We should pull back." But Rafiq waved them off with a smug grin. "I built this empire. Who are you to question me? The first sign of trouble? A failed real estate project? Millions lost overnight." But Rafiq didn't see it as failure. He saw it as a fluke. Instead of learning, he doubled down, pouring more money into bad deals, thinking he could buy his way out of mistakes. Debts piled up. Contracts fell through. Trusted partners distanced themselves. But Rafiq was blind to it all, because pride has a way of blinding men before reality does. His office, once buzzing with activity, grew quieter. The phone calls slowed. The respect in people's eyes faded, replaced by something unfamiliar to Rafiq: pity. But even as the walls closed in, he couldn't see the truth, because in his mind, empires don't fall, especially not his. What Rafiq didn't know was that his empire wasn't crumbling from outside forces. It was rotting from within, and the cracks he ignored were about to shatter everything. When the foundation is built on arrogance, the collapse is inevitable. Rafiq's empire didn't fall in silence. It crumbled with headlines, lawsuits, and betrayal. What started as whispers in boardrooms exploded across news outlets. Business tycoon Rafiq involved in fraud scandal. Financial crimes uncovered, empire built on lies. The media devoured him. Former allies who once praised his brilliance now distanced themselves with cold statements. We had no knowledge of his unethical practices. The same people who shook his hand were now pointing fingers. Bank accounts froze, properties seized. The luxury cars were gone, the lavish office empty. Even his closest advisors jumped ship, leaving him drowning in debts and disgrace. But the worst part wasn't the financial ruin. It was the isolation. Rafiq, who once commanded rooms with power, now sat alone, ignored, forgotten. Desperation crept in like a shadow he couldn't outrun. With nowhere to turn, he swallowed his pride and sought help from investors. After all, money has no memory, right? But fate isn't without irony, because one of the companies he approached for a bailout had a familiar name on the board: Amir. The boy he humiliated, the boy he mocked, the boy he thought was nothing. Rafiq didn't recognize the name at first, but he would. Oh, he would. Because karma doesn't knock softly. It kicks down the door. Karma doesn't wear a name tag. But when it arrives, you'll know. Rafiq, now a shell of the man he once was, sat in a sleek conference room. His expensive suit couldn't hide the desperation in his eyes. This meeting was his last chance, a deal with a rising company that could save him from financial ruin. He didn't bother learning the name of the company's CEO. Why would he? In his mind, anyone sitting across from him was just another investor waiting to be impressed. But this wasn't just another meeting. The door opened, and in walked Amir. No introduction, no dramatic reveal, just a quiet man with confident steps and a piercing gaze. Rafiq didn't recognize him, not right away. Why would he? To Rafiq, Amir had been nothing more than a forgettable face in a crowd years ago. But Amir remembered. Every word, every laugh, every moment of humiliation. The room filled with formalities, business jargon, investment pitches, but beneath the surface, the tension was electric. Amir remained calm, his face unreadable, while Rafiq spoke with rehearsed charm, unaware of the history sitting across the table. Then Amir leaned back, his voice steady. "You don't recognize me, do you?" Rafiq paused, confused. "Maybe this will help. Look at this filthy street rat begging for scraps. Does that sound familiar?" Silence. The color drained from Rafiq's face. Memories flooded back, the boy he'd humiliated in the street, reduced to nothing with a few cruel words. But now, the roles had reversed. The boy was gone. In his place sat a man with power, power that Rafiq needed more than air. Rafiq stammered, trying to recover, but it was too late. The shift in power wasn't just in the room. It was in every word left unsaid. Amir didn't need revenge. His success was enough. And for Rafiq, that was the cruelest justice of all. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply letting them see what you've become. Rafiq entered the pristine boardroom, his steps slower than they used to be. The weight of failure etched into every wrinkle on his once proud face. His tailored suit couldn't mask the desperation beneath, and his forced smile was a far cry from the arrogant smirk he once wore with ease. He was here for one reason: to secure a deal that could save what little remained of his crumbling empire. What he didn't know was that the deal would cost him more than money. Across the polished table sat Amir. No grand entrance, no dramatic flair, just a calm, confident man, dressed in simplicity, yet exuding an authority that filled the room. Amir recognized Rafiq instantly. The face was older, the arrogance dimmed, but the memory was sharp. There he is, Amir thought, the man who once crushed me with a single laugh. But Amir didn't flinch, because he had already won the moment he walked into the room. The meeting began, Rafiq pitching his proposals, using the same charm he'd relied on for years. But Amir sat silently, his eyes steady, his expression unreadable. Then came the moment. Amir leaned forward slightly, his voice calm yet cutting through the tension like a blade. "Funny how life works, isn't it?" Rafiq paused, confused. "Years ago you laughed at a boy in the street, called him a filthy street rat, remember?" Rafiq's face froze. The color drained from his skin. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out, because none could fix what was now broken. Recognition hit him harder than any financial loss ever could. The boy he had humiliated, the one he thought was beneath him, was now the man sitting across the table, holding his fate in his hands. But Amir didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice, because true power doesn't need to shout. "I remember you," Amir said quietly, "but I'm not here to settle scores. I'm here to show you that the nobody you mocked didn't need your approval to become something." Rafiq swallowed hard, his pride shattered, not by insults but by the success he could never claim. And that was the real victory. Amir didn't have to destroy him. Life had already done that. The loudest revenge is success spoken in silence. The room felt heavier now, not because of the deal on the table, but because of the undeniable shift in power. Rafiq sat there, his hands clasped tightly, trying to maintain the illusion of control. But his eyes betrayed him, filled with the kind of fear that no fortune could ever hide. Across from him sat Amir, no anger, no smug grin, just quiet confidence, the kind born from battles fought and won in silence. Rafiq's voice trembled slightly as he spoke. "I believe this partnership could be beneficial for both of us." But Amir didn't respond right away. He just listened, leaning back in his chair, observing the man who once reduced him to nothing with just a few cruel words. And now, Rafiq was the one begging not for coins like Amir once did, but for a lifeline. After a long pause, Amir finally spoke, his tone calm, even gentle, but each word cutting deeper than any insult could. "Isn't it strange how tables turn? Years ago you had all the power. Now, here we are." Rafiq's face grew tense, his pride crumbling with every second that passed. He tried to recover. I was young, foolish. We all make mistakes. But Amir simply nodded, unaffected. Mistakes teach us lessons, if we're willing to learn. Rafiq's desperation grew. Please, this deal could save hundreds of jobs. It's not just about me. But Amir remained unmoved, not because he was heartless, but because he no longer needed revenge. His success was louder than Rafiq's past insults. His growth was the proof. His presence in that room was the victory. Amir stood up, straightened his suit, and looked Rafiq in the eye one last time. I don't hold grudges, Rafiq. I hold lessons, and you were one of my greatest. Then he walked away. No deal, no need for harsh words, because the silence he left behind said everything. And that silence, it was deafening. The sharpest blade isn't made of steel. It's made of words that carry the weight of truth. As Amir reached the door, he paused, not out of hesitation, but for something more powerful: closure. Without turning back, his voice cut through the tense silence, calm yet sharp enough to pierce through Rafiq's fragile pride. You thought I was nothing. A pause, just enough to let the words hang in the air. Then he turned slowly, meeting Rafiq's hollow gaze. Turns out you were wrong. No anger, no arrogance, just the truth, delivered with the grace of someone who no longer needed revenge to feel whole. Rafiq sat there, his face a shadow of the man he once was. Not because of Amir's words alone, but because of what those words represented. Everything Rafiq had lost, and everything Amir had become. Rafiq's defeat wasn't in the failed deal. It wasn't in the empty bank accounts or the crumbling empire. It was in the realization that he had underestimated the very thing that now stood above him: resilience. Amir walked back to the table, not to offer pity, but to offer something more painful for a man like Rafiq: mercy. I could destroy what's left of you, but I won't. Rafiq's breath hitched, expecting humiliation. But Amir's next words hit harder than any insult could. Not because you deserve kindness, but because I deserve peace. That was it. No dramatic gestures, no need for revenge. Because true power isn't about crushing your enemies. It's about realizing you don't have to. As Amir left, Rafiq sat in the emptiness of his own making, haunted not by Amir's success, but by the echo of the lesson he'd never forget. The deepest scars aren't the ones on the skin. They're the ones etched into memory. After leaving the boardroom, Amir sat alone in his office, staring out the window at the city that once felt too big for a street kid like him. Now it was his. Yet the victory felt hollow. His mind replayed the past like an old film, scenes flickering in flashes, the mocking laughter, the cold eyes, the humiliation. Filthy street rat. Rafiq's voice echoed, buried deep, but never gone. The temptation burned. I could destroy him, Amir thought. He had the power to bankrupt Rafiq, crush whatever scraps of pride he had left, make him feel the same insignificance Amir once did. And for a moment, he wanted to. But then, the flashbacks shifted. Not to Rafiq's cruelty, but to Amir's own journey. The first coin he earned with dignity. Rayhan's belief in him when no one else cared. The promises he made to himself not to become like the very people who once looked down on him. He realized something powerful. Rafiq was already defeated, not by Amir, but by his own arrogance. Revenge wouldn't heal Amir's past. It would only chain him to it. Amir leaned back, closing his eyes. Do I want revenge or peace? Because one can't exist with the other. And in that quiet moment, he chose. Not because he couldn't destroy Rafiq, but because he didn't need to. True victory isn't defeating your enemy, it's becoming nothing like them. Amir's heart was heavy, but not with hatred, with clarity. He realized that revenge would only keep him tethered to a past he had already outgrown. His true power wasn't in crushing Rafiq, it was in showing him that he had already won. The next day, Amir requested a meeting. Not in a grand office, not under the spotlight of power, but in a small, quiet room. Rafiq arrived, expecting humiliation, expecting vengeance wrapped in success. Instead, he found Amir sitting calmly, no anger in his eyes, just resolve. Amir leaned forward, his voice steady but piercing like a blade of truth. "I thought about destroying you." Rafiq flinched, bracing for the blow. But then I realized, I don't need to. The silence was deafening. Amir continued, his words sharp yet filled with grace. "I won because I didn't become like you. Simple, honest, devastating." Rafiq's arrogance shattered. No insults to throw, no pride left to protect. Just the unbearable weight of knowing that the boy he once belittled had grown into a man who didn't even hate him, because hatred would have meant Rafiq still mattered. But Amir's forgiveness, that was the real punishment. Rafiq's shoulders slumped, his facade crumbling. Not because Amir destroyed him, but because Amir didn't need to. And that realization, it crushed Rafiq more than any revenge ever could. Sometimes, the greatest strength is knowing when to walk away. Amir stood up, his final words lingering in the air like an echo Rafiq couldn't escape. "I won because I didn't become like you." He didn't look back. There was no need, because looking back meant carrying the weight of a past he'd already conquered, and Amir was done carrying anything that didn't help him grow. As he walked out of the room, his steps weren't heavy with pride or victory. They were light. Light with the freedom that comes from knowing he'd risen above everything meant to break him. No more grudges, no more anger, just peace. Rafiq sat alone, the silence louder than Amir's words. For the first time in his life, he had no one to blame, no deals to save him, no power to hide behind, just his own reflection, a man defeated not by another's hands but by his own arrogance. He replayed Amir's words over and over, realizing that the empire he once built wasn't his true legacy. It was the bridges he'd burned along the way. Meanwhile, Amir's empire continued to grow, not built on revenge, not fueled by hatred, but on something stronger, resilience, integrity, and the courage to keep moving forward. Because in the end, Amir didn't just walk away from Rafiq. He walked into the life he was always meant to live. When life humbles you, it doesn't whisper. It roars. Rafiq sat alone in a small, dimly lit apartment, a far cry from the luxury penthouse he once ruled. No more marble floors, no glass walls with panoramic city views. Just cracked plaster, peeling paint, and the deafening sound of his own thoughts. This was his empire now. Not built from wealth, but from the rubble of his own mistakes. He stared at old newspaper clippings, headlines that once celebrated his name now etched with scandal and disgrace. Business mogul's empire crumbles. Once a king, now forgotten. For the first time, Rafiq couldn't lie to himself. His downfall wasn't bad luck. It wasn't betrayal. It was him, his arrogance, his belief that success made him invincible. His failure to understand that respect isn't bought, it's earned. Regret hit harder than any financial loss ever could. He thought about Amir, not with bitterness, but with something unfamiliar, admiration. The boy I humiliated built an empire with nothing but grit, and I destroyed mine with nothing but pride. But rock bottom had one gift to offer: clarity. Rafiq started over, no investors, no shortcuts, just small honest work. Cleaning offices, running errands, jobs he once sneered at, now his lifeline. Each day was a lesson in humility. Every coin he earned wasn't just money. It was a debt paid to himself. But karma wasn't done. Because Rafiq's greatest punishment wasn't poverty. It was the memory of who he used to be. And that was a lesson he'd carry forever. Success isn't about what you have. It's about what you give back. While Rafiq's world faded into the shadows, Amir's empire flourished under the light of resilience and integrity. Skyscrapers now bore his name, not as a symbol of wealth, but as a testament to a journey carved from struggle, grit, and determination. But Amir didn't measure success by the size of his offices or the numbers in his bank account. His true legacy? the lives he touched. He established foundations to help street children, kids who reminded him of the boy he used to be. Shelters that offered more than a roof, they offered hope. Schools that taught more than math and reading, they taught self-worth. Programs that didn't just feed the hungry, they fed dreams. Every time Amir saw a child's face light up with possibility, he saw himself. Not the boy who was humiliated, but the boy who refused to stay down. He often walked through the streets where he once begged, not in luxury cars but on foot, greeting vendors, shaking hands, never forgetting where it all started. I was one of them, he'd think, but I chose to rise. And that's what made Amir different. Not his fortune, not his power, but the fact that he never let success erase his humanity. From a street child with nothing to a leader with everything that mattered. Amir's transformation was complete. But his story? It was far from over. Because legacies don't end with success. They begin with what you leave behind. The greatest stories aren't the ones we live, they're the ones we inspire in others. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the bustling streets, Amir found himself back where it all began. The same dusty roads, the same crowded market, the same air thick with noise, life, and forgotten dreams. But this time, he wasn't a boy looking up. He was a man who had risen above. As he walked past familiar corners, his eyes caught something. A young boy barefoot, clothes torn, holding out his hand for spare change. His eyes weren't just hungry for food, they were hungry for hope. Amir stopped, not out of pity, but because in that child's face he saw himself. He knelt down, meeting the boy's gaze, not from above, but as an equal. "What's your name?" Amir asked gently. "Samir," the boy whispered, his voice small, but his spirit stubborn, just like Amir's had been. Amir reached into his pocket, not for money, but for something more valuable, his story. "I was where you are," he said softly, his voice filled with both pain and pride, "and look where I am now." Samir's eyes widened, not because of who Amir had become, but because someone finally saw him, not as a beggar, not as a burden, but as a boy with potential. Amir didn't just offer help that day, he offered hope. He enrolled Samir in one of the programs he'd built, the very kind of help Amir once needed but never had. A promise kept, not to the boy in front of him, but to the boy he used to be. As Amir walked away, he smiled, not because he had everything, but because he'd given something that mattered, hope. The one thing that can change everything. It's not the destination that defines you. It's the road you walked to get there. Amir stood on the balcony of his towering office, the city lights stretching endlessly before him. Skyscrapers glittered like stars, streets bustling with life below, the same streets he once called home.